welcome to this Prominence Developer Chat. My name is Mike Morrison from Digital Media Workshop, and today we're going to talk about the art of prominence. And to help us do that, I'm joined by concept artist Gary Ritchie.
Hi, Mike. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for doing this with me.
Oh, not a problem. I'm really excited to talk about this project.
So, concept artist Gary Ritchie, you're not just a concept artist, though, are you?
I'm not. I don't think I would call myself a concept artist. I'd call myself more of a designer and just someone who loves illustration, really enjoy problem solving on a lot of different levels. But my background involves graphic and web design. Got into web design early on in 1996, and then started to get an interest in visual effects. That's actually how we met, you and I. We were involved on the same visual effects team at this organization called the Pixel Corps, where a lot of the training was hands-on.
That's right. We met on a real-life colonization mission.
That's right.
Yeah, the Mars Project. That was an interesting project. Let's just talk about that for a minute.
It was. We had a team of artists working throughout different time zones who did everything from 3D modeling to texturing, animation, camera work, in order to visualize what a settlement might look like using a lot of the science that we know.
On that project, you were actually the team lead, and you didn't do any concept design work, but you obviously went to school for art.
That's right. I went to the Art Institute of Pittsburgh. First went there in 94 through 96 for an associate's degree in graphic design. And then I went back later, 2004, I think I graduated with a Bachelor of Science, again finishing up with graphic design that had a focus on illustration. So both the technical and the creative sides of visual design just keeps me going.
So let's talk about concept design for a second. You're a concept artist on Prominence. What does that mean?
Well, that means that I understand enough about the story and the requirements to help visualize a lot of the ideas that the environment needs to have. What I like to think about is who has built the environment and why, and using what imagination I can to sort of build on that and hopefully create something new and interesting.
One of the strongest guidelines that I think we both felt in terms of the concept design and then the actual creation of the environments in Prominence was that we both wanted them to be rooted in science fact more than science fiction.
Yeah, that's right. That was I think that's a very important distinction because I guess in science fiction fantasy, pretty much anything goes, right? When you're grounded in reality, or you've anchored to something in reality, for me, I think it makes it a little bit easier because you're sort of putting a perimeter or a fence around what's possible. As a designer, you don't really want to not have any parameters or restrictions. You need to have something that you can design within in order to hit the desired target. So understanding that requirement was a big help, and it really shaped where we looked for inspiration and reference.
Yeah. And then from there, we wanted to have different sources of technology so that we could sort of create not worlds so much, but some kind of visual language that could change from one area to the next as the player moved through the story. So let's talk about those for a minute. There were two primary sources that we used. One we called the Terran, and the other one was the Latari.
Yeah, that's right. Terran is, that comes from the Terran Corporation, which was going to look more industrial and heavier, heavy-duty type spacefaring equipment. And then on the other hand, you had the Latari, which was a more polished, cleaner lines, lighter colors, and cooler tones. which helped separate the two technologies, and I think made for some very interesting and varied environments.
There's some good explanation of how these technologies came to collide in the game world in the Prominence Prologue, where Alavaji, the chief engineer of the project, goes and he actually has to get a vessel retrofit for this mission. And in that prologue, there's dialogue and discussion about what had to change and what had to stay. And that kind of reflected the design decisions that you and I made in development.
I remember the other requirement too, and I don't know how much we can share about this, but the fact that the Latari retrofit all had to be connected. And the fitment was twofold. It was to mount it securely in position, but also interface it with Annie. There were areas where the cabling, the network cabling, if you will, would be running behind the walls. I think that is evident in medical. But there's other areas which I find more interesting, such as manufacturing and cargo control, and was it power control?
Yeah, power control is rife with cabling.
Yeah, and I think that made it more interesting. I think you also have some cabling in the service corridor as well, with the supercap towers.
Yeah, and also the big red power exchanger, and we had the red conduits that were showing, they were really defining where the power went and how it went from power control, well, from the core into power control, and then from power control, there were the dynamos underneath the floor, and then the central area and the pegboards, and then they would route out, and the stuff that went forward to power all the forward systems, that was going through the red conduit into the service corridor, and then that was splitting it up, and some of it was going, down and around into waste proc, some of it was going forward for the factory and MNCC and cargo.
That's right.
And we never really hang a lampshade on that power design or the cables going through Skyway or anything else. But it's all there. It's all designed, and it all harkens back to that same philosophy of, we were trying to build it as realistically as we possibly could with our personally limited amount of space travel that we've done.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, terrestrial as we are, we had to use our imaginations and research, and of course the experience from our Mars project.
Exactly, and we've both had a healthy dose of science fiction over the years as well.
So we're here on YouTube with this dev chat. How about we take folks through an example of how something goes from concept art and initial design all the way through to final.
Wait a minute, we're on YouTube?
Yes.
How's my hair?
Looks great.
Yeah, I have in mind Skyway. It was one of my personal favorites to develop for this project. And I believe, as with most of the environments, you provided a description of how the environment was pivotal in the game, the purpose that it served, how the player interacted with certain things within that environment. So after taking that and understanding that Skyway connects service corridor with manufacturing and cargo control, so it's way up off the manufacturing floor level, so it's suspended or supported, and that allowed me to think about how to design a structure that would prop this area up, and how I would bring that structure into the look. So you can, in the game, you can quite literally see that the structure comes into the Skyway and sort of acts as a skeleton. And I think that's one of the interesting aspects of this particular environment. Also, taking the stereotypical idea of a sci-fi corridor and thinking about how these repeating panels would look like, what other details can be used to help break that apart. As you know, in the middle of Skyway, there's sort of a workstation that the player interacts with. So that was another design opportunity, being able to build that out, and just another way to express the sort of Terran visual language, if you will. So yeah, that was one of my favorites. I didn't want to have just this hallway with a bunch of greebly panels on the walls. I wanted to have some visual interest. I also wanted to have some depth. So you have different layers of depth, especially in Skyway, where the you have the walkway. It's almost like a walkway within a walkway. Then you have the railings, and then just beyond that, the structure that seems to be holding everything else up. And then just beyond that, the paneling, the glass, the lighting is just above you, and then you have what is outside of the glass. So I think that helps create a very immersive environment for the player.
I remember when you first sent me the early sketches for this, and I remember being floored. I just remember loving the sketches so much and going, "Oh man, bringing Gary on for this was such the right idea." Some of the Skyway transitions, the animations that play as you move through Skyway, one of those in particular is one of my favorites in the whole game.
Awesome.
So you're actually based out of Pennsylvania.
I am. I live in Pittsburgh.
And I'm based out of Long Island in New York. And so we actually were trying to do art from 2 states away.
Yeah, that's pretty far. I wanted to bring up some horse shit about how we would meet in the middle at some cafe or something.
That would have been cool. Why didn't we do the project that way?
Travel expenses. Awful commute. But we got around that. No commute means we relied on technology. So Skype, which isn't working so well for us today, worked brilliantly for us during the busy times of this project when you and I were working very closely together, and was critical. And it's always fun to hear your radio voice, so close and so real, high fidelity. But I was generating a lot of artifacts, as I would call them, lots of sketches and digital paintings, and we needed a way to share them. And instead of using something really simple such as Dropbox, I made things complicated and put up a website. And I guess a couple of my goals was really to sort of record my progress. I wanted to be able to take notes, record the notes from our Skype chats, and relate some of those written notes to the sketches that I was generating, and also to be able to see sort of how a digital painting would evolve. So we used a product called Track, TRAC, and a technology called Subversion to sort of be able to commit versions of a sketch or a painting. And that also acted as a way to synchronize files between my computer and the server. And I think you were able to do that as well. Consequently, be able to pull them down from the server to your local computer to do reviews and that sort of thing.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. One of the things I love about any opportunity to work with you is that you're always embracing new technology, and I can always call you and get the lowdown on what the cutting edge technology to pay attention to at any given moment is. It's you're so wired into that.
Well, thanks. Yeah, it's probably a constant distraction from getting real work done, maybe.
I've actually heard a number of developers talk about using Track for their bug tracking. rather than using it for production, which I thought was interesting. I mean, it seems versatile. It seems very versatile. In fact, you could use it for a lot of different things. And I don't want to turn this dev chat into a conversation about implementation of technologies for development, but it really, I was really impressed by Track and what it could do.
Well, this is a dev chat, right?
It is. It is. That's true.
Right. I think that's what originally Track was developed for, was to help developers who are co-located to sort of work together on their code and to document that code and to track issues with that code. So we did much of the same thing. We used the issue tracker to sort of create tickets to track the progress of a crate design. We used the wiki to take lots of notes and to put up a lot of the images that were generated so that you could view the page and see everything all together there. So I think it was helpful. I know it was, selfishly, I put it up there for me so I could collect everything in one place. I like being able to just send a link to someone pointing to exactly what I'm talking about or asking about. So I think it's really handy for that.
For me, it was a tremendous help because the ability to go to one location and see every piece of information and decision making and process that has happened chronologically like that is a tremendous help because it reduces the it reduces the demand on me to make extra preparations or to be more organized, because of course everybody wants to be organized, but you don't always have time to be as organized as you'd like to be on a project like this when you're juggling hats and other responsibilities. So having that all there, it felt worth the effort. At first it felt like way too much effort. It felt like we were spending more time updating documents than we were working on the art. But then you get into a rhythm of it and it becomes more comfortable. And it was, in my opinion, it was really worth it. And being able to look back on it now is also very worth it because you really see you really get to appreciate the fruits of the labor.
Yeah, it kind of tells its own story about how it evolved. It's interesting.
Another piece of technology that we used on this project, for the first time, you and I, was developing really a Blender to Lightwave pipeline.
That's right. I have been a Blender guy for quite a number of years. Used to use Cinema 4D, as well as Softimage XSI, and a couple of other tools. But I found Blender to be a lot more friendly on my system, despite its interface. Once you get past the learning curve, it is actually very intuitive, and it's a very capable software. But getting what I was doing into your hands, created a little bit of extra work, a little bit of extra documentation, which we use Track for. And I don't know, I think the result turned out pretty well. I not only did I guess we should say that some of the concept art I did, some of it was in 3D. So I don't think that there was a whole lot of that was used by you directly.
There actually are some pieces that came from you, and then when they came in, sometimes things would happen like normals would be reversed or some of the geometry would be a little wonky and I would have to rebuild it. But there are actually pieces from you, from Blender, that became final assets in the game. And you're credited for that. You're actually listed for 3D modeling in the credits.
Wow.
Because some of your models made it into final. Ones that I can think of in particular are some of the really big fat beams, what we call the struct H's, that sort of have that purplish color to the core of them. And then another thing that made it to final were the workstations and chairs that you built for manufacturing and cargo control.
Those were fun, yeah.
Just did a little geometry cleanup and and then surfaced them and put them right in. So you're in there.
All right. Wow, I did voiceover. I did concept art,
Right.
3D modeling.
I almost forgot about the voiceover. You're credited for that, too. Your name appears in the credits 3 times.
Oh, dear.
A man of many talents.
I won't let it go to my head.
And so we got one more thing to talk about, which is the evolution of an environment from concept to final.
Bum, bum, bum. Was I off key? I was off key.
Not to me, Gary. Not to me. On key and on point. Gary Ritchie.